Hello and welcome to School Health Presents Holistic Transitioning. I'm Dr. Ray Height. This week we're going to be talking about going to the fair, and that's going to a back-to-school fair. But know one thing, this is not like any county or state fair you've ever been to, and we're going to do it in a way that actually allows us to stay within health guidelines, but begin the reacclimation process for the students while giving us the most pertinent information we can. So the first thing that you want to do when you're preparing for this is understand what the purpose of this really is. The purpose is, again, as we mentioned in that twofold. Number one, we need to begin that transition process of having the students come back in. Why? For some of our exceptional students, it's going to be a major transition. Don't forget what happened. For some of our students, being pulled out of that routine and being forced to move into remote learning was almost traumatic. And we had to, as educators and therapists, deal with that before we could even get into some of the things that had to deal with learning. So what we want to do is begin transitioning back, because again, this is going to be almost like, for neurotypical adults, a move or a change in job. We're going to be going to a new environment again, or at least an old environment that will have new ways. So creating this idea of a school fair makes it a fun activity as we go in. So the first thing that we need to do is, number one, identify those students who are going to most need this. What do I mean by that? Well, what we want to take a look at are some of our severe and profound students and some of our exceptional students who have more of a need for academic and cognitive support as we go through. Who are those students? Because we want to be able to bring them in, start the acclimation process, but we also want to be able to assess where they're at right at this point in time. There may be some skills that have regressed, there may be some skills that have been maintained, and we need to know that to be more effective when we're getting back into whatever our learning environment looks like in the fall. So even if we're going to a continuation of remote learning, which some districts are going to, or at least offering their parents, we know where those students are and what we can be doing to best support them. It's a very difficult time trying to support our students individually in a remote setting. But by at least having a simple set of assessments in place, we can have that general idea that allows us to continue to move forward and keep the parents in the loop. So first, identify those students. Who do we need to have in there? And secondly, identify what we're going to be looking for with those students. One consistent thing that we will be looking for in all the students is the idea that they know how to wash their hands. Now, why do I say this? We may have some students that can't physically wash their hands. That's all right. We want the importance of washing the hands. So as we're putting that together, that should be one of our assessments. Some of our other assessments can focus around, again, those individual needs of the students. And what you can't see here on the screen right now, but you'll be seeing in a few minutes, are different ideas that you might use as you're creating your fair. So once you know the students, once you know the assessments that you're going to be looking for, then what you want to do is you want to be sitting down and creating a schedule that's going to work. Unlike your typical county fair or state fair, it's not going to be everybody coming en masse. We're going to be doing this in a very staged and scheduled format. And so what we need to be doing is designing the games for the individuals, but at the same time, looking toward the parents and setting a schedule, working with them to say, okay, you're going to be coming to the fair at such and such a time. Now, the question I often get asked when it's something like this, how do we involve bus schedules with something like this? We still have to be very cautious. So make sure that if you are having some students who need to take the bus in, perhaps they're in a wheelchair, and they need a specialized bus to come and pick them up, or they need some other buses, work with your district administrators, work with your transportation department, and see what's going to work for everybody time frame wise. Also, when you're setting your schedule, you're going to want to sit down with building administrators and say, okay, what classrooms can we use for different booth areas? Notice I said booth. Again, we're keeping this idea of the fair. So when you go to a station, basically, whether it be in classroom A, classroom B, wherever it's at, each of the stations is a booth. Because again, we want this to be fun. We want the movement back in the schools as we begin this acclimation process to be something that's easy and fun, but at the same time, each of the booths is also going to have a specific purpose. And some of those booths may only be used for a handful of students. Some, like the hand washing booth, may be used for every single one. So we'll need to be having a schedule that allows for students to move from location to location. Get the parents involved right off the bat. Explain to them what they're doing. Explain to them what booths their students will be going to. Let them know that they would be permitted to have someone come along with it so they could see what's going on. We've got to watch with absolute numbers, though. We can't have too many people there congregating in the same classroom at the same time. So knowing you've got a couple of different groups, make sure you're staging things so everybody is staying socially distant in an appropriate manner. But again, have that parent, have a guardian, have someone that can come with them so they're seeing and experiencing what's happening too. Once you've got that communication established with the parents, also talk to them about how that communication will continue to go forward. That these are assessments that are going on now. You're not going to have a final decision about, oh, we're going to do X, Y, and Z lessons as they're walking out or headed back to the bus. That's going to take a few days to process so that you're able to individualize things as best possible, but keep the parents, keep the guardians in the loop. Make sure that communication is strong. Once you've got those things set and ready to go, then what you've got to do is take a look internally at the teams that you'll have. And what I always like to say in this particular case is you're going to have an A team and a clean team. What does that mean? Well, the A team is going to be your assessment team. That's going to be the group that's actually going to be manning the booths and making sure that they're recording the appropriate data for that student and then getting that data where it needs to go. You're also going to have your clean team. Kind of obvious what that is, but as an individual goes from one booth to the next, the clean team will come in behind. We'll make sure everything is disinfected at that case. At the hand washing station, you'll be taking water, dumping water from bowls back into a sink, cleaning the bowls, bringing it back. For the clean team, think of it this way. You can have any school personnel doing this. It's not as though we're going to be using poisonous chemicals. You'll be using things like cleaning wipes or cleaning solutions that are standard cleaning solutions. Things like a Clorox, a Lysol, whatever wipes you may have that are cleaning wipes. You'll be using, if you want, gloves to go through. I always recommend wearing gowns too. Why do I recommend gowns here? Because, first of all, again, with the idea of this being a carnival, it's almost like we're dressed up. But another important thing about the gowns is we're not as worried about if there are droplets being spread from one individual to another. They're not just getting on our clothes. We're going to wash our clothes at the end of the day anyway, but having the gown there really adds another layer of protection. It's like wearing a mask. So you'll want to have things set up in advance as you go in. Now, what about the booths themselves? How are we doing this? One thing I will recommend for every back-to-school booth, or booth for every back-to-school fair, is a hand washing station. And again, this is a game. Have a couple of bowls. You notice I've got nothing fancy here. There's no fancy sink. There's no anything. It's just a couple of bowls. What the students have to do is actually with the first bowl, make sure it's warmer water so they don't get a little bit crazy. Put their hands in and pull out. Then what you're going to do is have foam soap that goes onto their hands where they can now be wiping down the foam soap. Some of you may prefer the foam soap right off the bat. That's fine too, however you want to do that. But then the second bowl, and I'll explain why 2 bowls in a second. The second bowl is for them once they've done the rubbing. And my suggestion to you, sing with them or sing for them, happy birthday. Why? Because that's going to encourage the time for rubbing the hands and work with them. For some of our individuals, it's just even going hand over hand. And I know some people are saying, wait a minute, hand over hand, what about social distancing? You're washing hands, you're there in the soap with them. So what you can be doing is leaning over. As long as you're wearing a mask, you're protecting them. As long as they've got their mask on, you're protecting them. So having that soap on both of your hands is fine as we go through, or have the parents work with them too in that particular booth. That's another great idea, but you're also showing the parents a proper way of doing hand over hand activities. Once they're done, have them just kind of rinse things off and a towel to dry their hands. So again, we're teaching them about this. Why 2 bowls? Here's the reason why. If you are doing a scenario where you're having the students dip their hands first, then go to the foam, remember, just dipping your hands in, actually, I always worry about people saying, well, wait a minute, whose hands have been in there? So by dipping your hands in one bowl first and another bowl second, it's almost as though from a psychological standpoint, what the kids and the parents are saying, no, this is clean water. And so that's what you want to create. We want to create a safe environment in as many ways as possible. So station 1, booth 1, hand washing. What else do we want to be doing? I encourage you to also, in OTs, you'll love this, fine motor practice. Let's practice putting face masks on stuffed animals. Lamekins has been my volunteer for all these because she loves camera time, but she's also been wearing her mask like a good person is doing in this day and age. So within that framework, we've got the practice of putting on and taking off a mask in a format that actually allows for practice on something else, not just them. We're acclimating the students to everyone wearing masks as they come back in. So that's another good booth to have along the way. What other types of booths can we have? Well, again, depending on the needs of the students, maybe we have some type of a pattern booth. And again, I've got 6 different boxes up here with 3 different figures to go into. And this is actually part of the OATECA Functional Skills Assessment. And I just love this one, copying the pattern, because everything is based on Velcro and placed in the correct area. So we can actually do some assessments. Now, it doesn't have to be 6 pictures. You can have something that's 2, you could have something that's 1, but have some type of matching and pattern arrangement for them. You might be working just letters. You might be working just numbers. Have something that they can be touching or identifying. And yes, I'm saying touching. Wipe these things down afterwards. It's part of the clean team's job is to wipe them down. But get them involved with what's going on so you know that it's intentional movement towards things. It's intentional towards the 4. It's intentional towards the T. And what I'm dealing with right here is just an example of a brain ball. So there is another booth, letter, number identification. So far we've got hand washing, we've got mask putting on, but we've also got pattern identification, we've got letters, we've got numbers. What else? If we're working fine motor, some of you might recognize this from the old days, taking a milk container. And sorry, I didn't have the big gallon jugs, I drink Fairlife. So having a milk container and dropping things into the milk container. This might be too small for some of our individuals. I get it, but we remember that. So have something different, even if it is a paper clip. And I am recommending something that's a little bit smaller, but now we're dropping it into a larger bucket. So that's something we can be doing along the way, just to be working on some of the fine motor skills. That's a simple idea. OTs, take it and run with it. Have that booth where they're practicing different things and you're getting an opportunity to assess where they are at skill-wise. In all of these, I'm also going to recommend having some type of time. Why? Because when we're dealing with time, if we've got a device that gives them visual timing, they're also learning to cue into, again, that acclimation of, hey, these things are going to be limited in how we do things. And if you've got the opportunity and they need the auditory, you can always turn auditory on. So whether you're using a time timer or some other visual timing device, that's a good thing to have at all of the booths as we go through. Another thing you want to be aware of is some of the individuals, especially as they're getting older, they have some differentiated abilities. You want to assess where they're at using different tools. So for some of our students who may be functioning at a higher cognitive level, have them do some things reading-wise with a C-pen as they're going through. Can they move the C-pen across the line? Can they hear what's going on and maybe answer a question? So what we're doing is we're gauging the use of this, we're gauging fine motor as we're going along. We're also getting some answers from them, but we're able to then better assess some of our students who may have dyslexia or reading issues in comprehending a paragraph. So something like the C-pen can be used as a tool in that way, and this is a tool that, again, I've seen multiple districts use as a tool that can be sent home easily with the students, where it's almost a one-to-one with their computers because they may have some textbooks they've got to bring home too. C-pen can also be cleaned down with a disinfecting wipe. I have some groups that have loved using the glass house. So maybe have this as an access style for some booths too, for that student that has no use coming down perhaps from their neck on down or limited fine motor skills. Can they actually move their head around to actually steer a cursor? And can they use a bike click or some other form of a click? Don't forget too, switches in AAC devices. Have something, and many of you will recognize my Big Mac here. This, of course, is my famous
"You are awesome"
button. So have something like that where we're getting targeting skills worked out. We're also getting that idea of selection coming through. If you are working on some targeting skills, if you're working on movement and progression towards using a switch, I always suggest starting with a proximity switch, the candy corn. I love the candy corn large as that starting movement, because not all of our students, as they're pressing down, have the ability to press hard enough to activate some of the switches unless it's a very light touch switch. So having a proximity switch, that student, if they have difficulties, can simply move their hands over it and have it activate. And I love the large candy corn for that. Those are some of the booths you can have. Create other booths. Excuse me. Have things that are fun for our kids as we go through. But the idea is this. Each of the booths is an assessment and giving us more information to make that IEP even stronger as we go into the fall, and allowing us to create individualized lessons that can be used, whether it be face-to-face or in a remote setting or some type of hybrid. And it's also acclimating the students to maybe transitioning back into this learning environment, but showing some of the students who are afraid to go outside because of the germs that are out there that it's okay to go to certain areas. So this is a back-to-school fair unlike a fair you've ever had before. But when done the right way, and when involving parents, administrators, and everyone within the school community right off the bat, we have higher levels of communication, and we have a more effective use of our time and our resources as we go through. If you've got other questions about this, please feel free to reach out to me at rheipp@schoolhealth.com. And for some of you that are reading our newsletter, you'll recognize this as the foundation for the Connecting with the Community piece from this month. But now this is a little more in-depth as to how you can put them together. I thank you for all that you're doing out there. Recognize we are all in this together.